You're listening to the Spark Your Light podcast, episode number 263, the number one key to your success. This episode is for you if you have big dreams and big goals, and sometimes you're out there searching for the secret. What is it? What is it that's going to get you there? This is based on some of my favorite research, and it's going to be a little bit of motivation that you need, maybe a little bit of a perspective shift for just igniting that fire towards your goals. So if that's something you're looking for, then this is a perfect episode for you. I have been reading an incredible book, and you probably know the TED Talk. It goes something like this. University of Pennsylvania psychologist Angela Duckworth spent decades studying what is it that makes some people successful and others not. She studied everyone from students competing in the National Spelling Bee to cadets at West Point Academy. And she found that all of these groups had one thing in common. And it wasn't a high IQ or social intelligence or even talent. I think that's something we like to tell ourselves. We like to tell ourselves that other people are just smarter and more talented. But the truth is, the number one thing that Angela Duckworth found that creates success is grit. And Duckworth defines grit as passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. And this is something that so many of us lack because we either don't have the passion or don't have the perseverance. I want you to think of being in a job that you just feel so about. You're not going to have passion for very long-term goals in that job. You're not going to have grit when it's difficult. You'll probably just apply to a different job. And oftentimes we lack the perseverance. Maybe we haven't built that muscle of resiliency. And so today, when we think about the concept of grit, what I want you to really take away is how can you create that recipe of both passion and perseverance for your personal, very long-term goals. So we're going to start with the end in mind. We're going to start with the very long-term goals. So I want you to think about, what are my very long-term goals? Why did I press play on this episode? What is the success I am seeking? What is that vision? I want you to go there. Okay. And it's important here that you think about very long-term goals, because those big dreams and goals that we have are the ones that are most exciting. They're the ones that we have vision for. So I want you to think about, what is my vision? And go there. Go to that vision and let that ignite passion, because it's often vision that ignites passion. And I find that when I am lacking grit, it's because I am not connected to my vision. And so I don't have the passion. And really, passion is what I like to call a spark. It is a spark, but it's a spark that stays lit. It's not a spark that comes and goes. The passion is something that is deep inside you. It is something that you feel you're meant to do. So for me, you probably know, if you've been listening to this podcast, that I'm really passionate about my next book that I'm working on. And so my spark is having my books in Target. That is my number one thing. You'll probably hear me say it like so many times between now and when the book actually comes out. And then someday when it's in Target, I'm going to mash up all of these clips of me saying it on the podcast for years prior, because that's passion. That is that feeling that you just get so excited when you think about a goal. That's passion. But passion alone is not enough. So first, you want to connect with that passion, and you want to find a way to connect with that passion on a daily basis. So I like to write down my goals every single day in a journal. I love the Start Today journal. That's the one that I use. And I just write down my goals every day as if they've already happened, a little manifestation tactic. So I actually write like, my books are on the shelves at Target. And that's so fun to connect with those goals. Even close your eyes and do a little visualization. I can imagine myself on a shopping trip at Target. I got my Starbucks coffee. I venture over to the book section and I see my books. And what do? Of course, I sign all the copies that are there. And that's just a beautiful visualization that I have. So how can you create that for yourself? How can you create that sense of passion? And I think it's important to note that the passion is linked to something that isn't like a bland, boring goal. So not to say that if I wrote my goal, like my book will sell lots of copies or I will make X dollars from my book. Those things don't create as much spark, at least for me personally, than seeing my book on the shelves at Target. Another one that I love, and I was just telling my husband Richie about this last night. I cannot wait someday to walk by a stranger and see them reading my book. I imagine this, I have this like grand vision. Again, this is the power of visualization. I imagine this maybe in an airport or on a beach, somewhere where people read a lot. And I just imagine myself walking straight by. If this is you, someday, if this happens to you ever, I will not stop you. I will not introduce myself. I am just going to lay low, fly under the radar, and keep walking. And Richie says like, oh no, I'm going to stop and say, that's a really good book. And I don't know if they'll know it's me because I'm not going to like plaster my face on the cover. At least I say that I'm not going to do that. Maybe if like, for example, the publishing company really felt strongly about that, I guess maybe, but it's not my intention. So that's a vision that I have. And it sparks me so much more by having like these really clear moments that I know. I haven't even experienced them yet, but just thinking about them gives me all sorts of feelings inside that really spark my light. Those are how you want to write your goals and think about your goals to create passion. Yes, if the book is in every Target in America, I will probably sell a lot of copies and I will probably make a significant amount of money on selling those copies. And I'm excited for that. That money will create a lot of good for our family. But that is not the thing that sparks me. That is not what creates passion. So I think it's important to think about your goals in context of what creates passion for this goal. That's part one. And then part two is perseverance. So how can I have perseverance for that goal? I think people like to think that with certain character traits like perseverance, it's something you're born with or it's something you're born without. And if you weren't born with it, then it's not something that you're going to be able to cultivate. And so you might as well stop trying. I do not believe this. I do not believe that perseverance is reserved for those of us that were lucky enough to be born with it. I do think that we all have different personalities, and some people have a really determined personality, and other people might have just a different type of personality, not bad or wrong, but just different. Maybe there are other traits that they are really strong in, and determination is not as strong. For example, is that person as competitive? Probably not, right? But for the really determined person, they're probably really competitive. When they played sports as a kid and growing up, they were probably the one who always wanted to win or get first place, right? Those kinds of people are typically pretty determined. That being said, it's possible for any of us to create perseverance regardless of our personality. And so I want you to think about, when in my life have I been most perseverant and what has helped me build that resiliency? Something that we find over and over again is that resiliency often comes from challenges. So it's ironic because you need the resiliency to get through the challenge, but it's the challenge itself that creates the resiliency, which is why there's been a trend of do hard things. And I love this trend, to be honest. I always feel so good after a really hard workout, which is why I love SYL, which is the sponsor of today's episode. I love SYL because when I finish a really hard class, I feel that whatever my day throws at me probably won't be as hard as that class. And I feel like I'm building my resilience bank for when I go through something really difficult. I think of doing hard things intentionally sort of as a way to build the resilience bank, but I'm going to be completely honest and say I don't find that they're as helpful when you're in the middle of a really, really hard time. I will say that when I was living at the hospital with Michael, a cold shower didn't help me get through it. It wasn't it. It was hope that there was light at the end of the tunnel and I was a little bit closer, which is a huge part of the inspiration for the book I'm writing. And so I do believe in doing hard things and cold showers or cold plunges and hard workouts as a way to build that muscle and just build the self-talk that I'm capable of anything life throws at me and I can do hard things. And those things were extremely important in getting through the hospital time. So I think they were so valuable. But first of all, I didn't even have the capacity to exercise. I couldn't really leave the hospital very frequently. Occasionally we would leave if Michael's grandparents, so my parents or my in-laws, were babysitting him because he actually couldn't be left alone. And we would go home to shower in our own shower. We maybe did that twice in the entire month that we lived there. So it wasn't often or frequent, but that's something that we just didn't really have capacity for in terms of doing hard things. But I did shower there. And actually, ironically, when we got upgraded to our better room, so if you don't know the story, I'm going to really, really quickly sum it up because for those of you who've heard me talk about it, who've listened to past episodes, I don't want to be too repetitive. But essentially, we moved into the hospital with my son when he was first born, and we cared for him there and we lived there. And for most of our stay, we were in this shared hospital room. But there was a wonderful upgrade in our last week where we got to go into our own room because we were there for so long. We were on this list of, families that were going to be upgraded if there was an open room, a single. So that's what we got. And it was really great. But one of the problems with the single, the only problem we had with it, is that there was no hot water. However, we walked out of those cold showers and we're like, man, it is so much better having a single. I would much rather choose the single and cold water than the shared room with no window with hot water. So I actually had the experience of taking cold showers in the hospital. And I think it can't hurt, but it wasn't the thing that gave me the resilience. But the cold showers I took in weeks and months and years leading up to that moment, and the hard things I did and the challenges I did and the self-talk I built and this resiliency I built over time, because it is like a muscle, was immensely important in getting through each day. So looking at your own life, what do you do now on a daily or weekly basis that helps you build your perseverance, helps you build that muscle? And if you're not challenging yourself, that's the first place to start. You can challenge yourself in all sorts of ways. We like the physical ways. They're very popular. You can also challenge yourself at work. You can challenge yourself in your career. You can challenge yourself in your personal goals. But you want to challenge yourself on a consistent basis. That is incredibly important. And then you also want to work on that self-talk piece. So the self-talk needs to really complement the challenge in building this inner dialogue that I am capable, that I am resilient, that I can do hard things. And one of my favorite strategies for improving self-talk that I talk about a lot is called segment intending. It's something that Abraham Hicks teaches. And basically it's a strategy where you take a given segment of your day and you set an intention for that segment. And so as it applies to self-talk, you would take a specific segment of your day, like a workout or a cold shower or a challenging meeting at work. And you would set the intention to speak to yourself positively during that period of time. And you would set the intention that if your mind strays and you find yourself spiraling on a negative thought, that you're just going to take a deep breath and come back to your positive intention to speak to yourself positively. And with regards to resiliency and perseverance, you can also add there that you want to speak to yourself in a way that really cultivates resilience. So for example, during my SYL cycle workouts, I will say things to myself like, You can do this. This is temporary, and you can do anything that is temporary. You are strong. You are capable. You can do hard things. And I will especially say that to myself during a really, really hard part of the class. So for example, if there's like a push, which is when you push your pace faster than the pace of the song, it's usually like 30 seconds. And so there's a confined start and end. It's almost like a mini segment intend, where for that 30 seconds, I'm going to just speak whatever I can into myself to get through. And sometimes it's just one foot in front of the other. And sometimes it is like all of this positive self-talk, right? Whatever it is that can get you through it. But that's a great way to practice the positive self-talk. So then when you're later in the moments that aren't planned, like me being in the hospital with my son, I was able to tap into that self-talk because it was a habit, because it was natural. So when things were hard, I just thought, we're going to get through this. We can get through this. Can we get through one more day? Just like I say in the workout class, can I get through one more minute? Yes. Can I get through one more song? Yes. Then I'm going to keep going. And so it becomes really good practice to incorporate when things are tough. When you're pursuing your big dream or big goal and you need that perseverance piece, you've gotten a lot of practice. And then the other piece that I think is so important is hope. So like I've mentioned, I actually believe that it is better to have hope and be let down than to have fear and be proven right, because it is the hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that you are getting closer and you're one day closer and you're one step closer that will give you the resilience to keep going. But if you have fear and then you're let down, then there's not much that can keep you going. And I experienced that firsthand when I chose to not get my hopes up after so long of being in the hospital and constantly being let down. And it was that night that Michael had failed another one of his fasts, which was the way he was going to get to go home, is passing a fast, being able to maintain his blood sugar at a stable level, which he was not able to do for a very long time. And I felt the lowest that I have felt in any time in the hospital in that moment when I was let down after not having hope. But in the moment when I was let down after having hope, I was extremely disappointed, which is a hard pill to swallow. It was not easy, but I had enough resilience to say, okay, we're going to get through one more day. We're one step closer, even if it feels like we're going backwards, because that's what hope gave me. So combining that practice of perseverance with this optimistic mindset of getting your hopes up as you go through the process. And getting your hopes up doesn't mean that you're going to give up if you don't get the thing you want. So I think there's a lot of misconception around hope. Getting your hopes up means I know it might take 10 years, but I'm resilient enough to continue. And I know that I'm eventually going to get there. It's really a belief in your own ability. It's a belief that it's possible for you and that you're eventually going to get there, whatever the goal is. And so when you combine those things for yourself, you have grit. And when you have grit, nothing will stop you. It doesn't matter how the circumstances change, how things don't go your way, because you have the number one key to get where you're going. So I hope this episode reminds you to tap into that grit. It's inside of you. Any of us can create grit. It is not something you're born with or born without. And if this is inspiring you, I encourage you to actually read Angela Duckworth's book, Grit. I'm listening to the audiobook. If you're an audiobook person, because you're a podcast person, you might be an audiobook person. I think it's fantastic. She reads it herself, which for me is like a huge thing with the audiobook, is if the author's reading it, it's so much more engaging. And she has a lot of stories of children building grit and how there are so many factors that help us. And also, if you're a parent, this is really good information to think about in your parenting style, how you can help your children build grit or your loved ones build grit. So super, super important. And I encourage you to read it if this inspired you. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope that this week brings a very gritty version of you that is willing to persevere, even if the goals are very long-term, and that connects to that passion that is so important. Thank you for watching or listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.